What's the emergency?
Dispatch this, isn't it 2 over? Do you copy? We've located the subject, male, mid-40s. He's down, no pulse, multiple wounds. It's bad. The doggy's here contained. It's quiet, not aggressive, just watching. Call the coroner and get animal control now.
What's the emergency? Dispatch? This is Unit 2 over. Do you copy? We've located the subject, male, mid-40s. He's down, no pulse, multiple wounds. It's bad. The doggy's here contained. It's quiet, not aggressive, just watching. Call the coroner and get animal control. Nobody lived alone, quiet, simple life, just a male and his dog. But what deputies found inside that house left them speechless. There was no burglar, no intruder, no forced entry, only a lifeless body and the sound of breathing from a crate in the corner. This wasn't just a bite. This was a violent, fatal attack, and the killer was the one creature he trusted most. This is the tragic story of Richard Damroseski and the horrifying betrayal inside his own home. You're watching Animal Quests, if you care about real life. Survival stories and the dangers hidden in plain sight. Subscribe now. Like this video and share it with someone who needs to hear the truth. His name was Richard L. Dombrowski, 46 years old, a lifelong resident of Ria Asmal quiet town in Monroe County, New York, just west of Rochester. Ria isn't the kind of place where you expect something horrifying to happen. It's a place of open fields, old barns, and friendly neighbors who wave at you from across the street. The kind of town where everyone knows someone, who knows someone, where you leave your doors unlocked. Richard lived alone in a modest home on Kendall Road, not isolated, just peaceful. The kind of place a man goes when he wants a bit of solitude, a break from the noise of the world. To his family, Richard was dependable, soft-spoken, a man who didn't need much to be content. He had a passion for photography and a fascination with air shows. His sister once said that if there was a vintage war bird flying overhead, Richard would be outside before anyone else. Jean, he didn't live loud, he lived. Still, there were no criminal records, no rubble with neighbors, no strange behavior. Richard didn't draw attention, but those close to him say he had a big heart, especially when it came to animals. So it came as no surprise to them when, months earlier, Richard had adopted a Doga mixed breed rescue, taken in to share his quiet world. For Richard, the dog was more than just company. It was companionship, a silent partner in the quiet corners of daily life. They were seen walking together near the woods, behind his property, calm routine, nothing out of place. He posted photos of the dog, occasionally, never boastful, never too much, just a man and his dog, that's all he needed. But no one, not his family, not his neighbors, not even Richard himself, could have imagined what would unfold inside that home. That the dog he trusted, the one he fed, walked and cared for, would become the very source of his violent end. Richard Damroseski was an ordinary man, but his final moments were anything but ordinary. This is not just a tragedy. This is the story of a life stolen. Not by fate or illness or crime, but by something far more unsettling, a betrayal. No one saw coming. The dog didn't have a name that made the papers, no viral photos. No shelter story that tugged at heartstrings online, just a mixed breed, medium-sized. Some reports would later speculate about a pit bull lineage. What is known is that the dog had been with Richard for only a few months. Not long, but long enough to become a part of his daily life. He likely found the dog through a local rescue or informal adoption. Ria, like many towns, has its share of people trying to rehome animals, especially ones with unclear histories, and Richard, with his quiet nature and big heart, may have simply wanted to help. He wasn't the kind of man to leave a dog without a home. People in the neighborhood, those who passed by occasionally on Kendall Road, remember seeing Richard walking the dog along the gravel shoulder of the street behind his house near the tree, and there was nothing threatening about their presence. No barking, no tugging on the leash. The dog didn't lunge, didn't growl, didn't bare its teeth. He looked well behaved, one neighbor recalled, just a quiet man and his dog there. Were no complaints filed? No animal control visits? No documented signs of aggression? As far as anyone could tell, the dog had adjusted to life in the quiet home, just as Richard had hoped. But there was one thing no one could be sure of, not even Richard. Where did the dog come from? What kind of trauma, neglect, or survival instincts had it developed before ever meeting him? When a dog's background is unknown, so is its wiring. Some may have endured abuse, others may have fought to survive on the streets. And even those that appear calm can carry something else beneath the surface, something old, something primal, and sometimes it only takes one moment, one trigger for those instincts to wake up. Richard never reported anything unusual, no aggression, no snapping. But animal behavior doesn't always give warnings in the way we hope it will in some dogs, especially those with uncertain pasts. Stress can build silently and erupt suddenly. No one knows what set it off, not yet. Not for sure, but what happened inside that house on May 7th, 2025 would soon draw in the Monroe County Sheriff's Office and reveal the kind of violence no one could have predicted. It was the evening of Monday, May 19th, 2025, just after 8:20 p.m. And when deputies from the Monroe County Sheriff's Office were dispatched to a home on Kendall Road in Rhea, New York, the request had come in as a welfare check, the kind of call officers received more often than most. People realize a family member had been trying to reach Richard Damrowski for hours. No answer, no return text, just silence. That silence began to feel wrong. Richard wasn't the type to disappear or go off the grid. He lived quietly. Yes, but he wasn't careless. And when he didn't answer, and when his car was still parked in the driveway, his loved ones grew concerned. Deputies arrived at the property around nightfall. The porch light was on, the front door was closed. There was no noise inside, no barking, no motion. Officers knocked, no answer. They entered the home. What they found inside would stay with them for the rest of their careers. Richard Damrowski was already dead. He lay on the floor of his home, his body showing significant trauma to the face and neck, as noted later by investigators. It wasn't subtle, it wasn't survivable, and it wasn't a natural death. This wasn't a heart attack or a fall. It wasn't a robbery gone wrong. It was violent, it was brutal, and it was clear, almost immediately, that the injuries had been inflicted by an animal. The kind of damage only powerful jaws and unrelenting force could do. Then came another shock in the same house. Not far from the body, officers found a dog alive and locked inside a crate. The very same dog Richard had raised, the dog that had shared his walks, his photos, his quiet daily rituals. According to the sheriff's office, family members who had arrived just minutes before, deputies had managed to confine the dog. The crate was secured. The dog was contained, but the violence had already happened. The house, once a quiet retreat, had become a scene of horror, and the dog, once a symbol of companionship, now sat behind steel bars, its role in the attack all but confirmed by the condition of the man who once fed it. Deputies secured the scene and called in investigators. The media wouldn't learn of the incident until later, but what happened inside that house would send a shock through the town of Rhea and far beyond. How could this happen? Why would a dog with no documented history of aggression turn so violently on every person who gave it a home? Those questions would ripple across Monroe County, but for the family of Richard Damrowski, no answer would ever be enough. What deputies saw when they stepped further into the house wasn't just tragic, it was disturbing. One official would later describe the scene off the record as simply a horror show. There was blood on the floor, smeared along the entryway to the living room, a trail leading to where Richard's body had fallen. Scattered nearby a toppled lamp, a broken coffee mug, a pair of glasses bent, at the frames bite wounds marked Richard's face, neck, and upper chest. Not defensive wounds, not shallow scrapes. These were deep, aggressive, consistent with a sustained attack, the kind meant to incapacitate, perhaps even kill. He had likely been alive when the attack began. Deputies, still trying to process what they were seeing, acted quickly and cautiously. The dog was still in the house in a crate, but no one knew its mental state, whether it was agitated, panicked, or ready to strike again. With steady hands and careful steps, the officers moved toward the crate inside. The dog paced silent. It didn't bark, it didn't growl, but its presence in that moment felt heavier than words could explain. The deputies removed the animal safely and placed it under control. There were no injuries to the officers, no resistance. The dog didn't lunge, it didn't snarl, it simply allowed itself to be taken, and that more than anything left everyone shaken. This dog had just killed a man, its own owner, and now it stood calmly without protest, as if nothing had happened. Within the hour, the dog was transported to Lollipop Farm Humane Society in Fairport, just east of Rochester, the organization which serves as Monroe County's animal control partner. Would house and monitor the dog for several days. Staff conducted evaluations, behavior checks, monitoring for signs of stress or aggression. But the decision came swiftly. Later that same week, the dog was humanely euthanized, according to a statement released by officials. There was no mistake. The injuries on Richard Dombrowski, combined with the presence of the dog, the confinement of the animal by family members, and the forensics on scene confirmed beyond doubt this dog killed its owner. There was no third party, no sign of a break-in, no sign of provocation. The only violence in that home came from inside. The question that gripped the small community of Rhea, New York, and anyone who followed. The story was painfully simple. How did this happen? Richard Dombrowski was not found struggling with the dog. He was found lifeless on the floor, and the dog inside a crate, not attacking, not resisting, just waiting. That single detail shifted the conversation, because it raised even more disturbing possibilities. Had Richard managed to put the dog in the crate after it mauled him? Was he still conscious after the attack, bloodied, disoriented, trying to protect himself, and perhaps even the dog, from further chaos? Or worse, did the dog walk into the crate on its own, moments after the violence, as if nothing had happened? Investigators couldn't say for certain. There were no witnesses inside that house, no surveillance footage, no time-stamped record of when the attack occurred. All they knew was that by the time deputies entered the residence at approximately 8:20 p.m. on May 19th, 2025, Richard was already gone, and the dog was already secured, contained by family members who had arrived shortly before. Deputies were called. That timeline only deepened the mystery. What happened in those final moments? Why had the dog turned violent? It hadn't shown any prior signs. There were no complaints, no previous reports of aggression. Neighbors had seen Richard walking the dog just days earlier, calm, obedient, silent. No barking was reported that night, no yelling, no screams heard from inside. The house, it was, by all accounts, a silent tragedy. Animal behaviorists weighed in off the record, and through local interviews, some speculated about redirected aggression, a phenomenon where an animal, overstimulated by something it cannot reach suddenly, lashes out at the nearest target. Others floated the idea of a neurological episode, a psychotic break, rare, but possible, especially in dogs with unknown histories. Remember, Richard had adopted the dog just months prior. It was believed to be a rescue, a mixed breed of uncertain lineage, possibly with pit bull ancestry, though not confirmed. Its past before Richard was a mystery, and sometimes that silence hides things we never expect. There was no medical condition found on Richard, no evidence of a stroke or and collapse that might have startled the dog, no indication of drug use or intoxication. Just a man in his own home, and the dog he cared for. Somehow that relationship broke, and no one will ever truly understand why. News of the attack spread quickly through the tight-knit community of Rhea, New York, and with it came a deep collective confusion. People didn't understand, they couldn't. This wasn't Ammon known for reckless behavior. This wasn't someone who kept aggressive dogs chained in the yard or let them roam freely. Richard Dombrowski was calm, careful, routine. And yet in the end, He was found alone in his own home, killed by the very animal he cared for. Their action across the neighborhood was instant and raw. One neighbor told a local reporter, "I used to see him walking the dog around the block, always calm, it never barked, nothing ever seemed off." Another added, "He was friendly, polite, kept to himself, but he'd wave, you'd never think something like this could happen, not here." Shock, disbelief, grief, but also a strange kind of fear. Not fear of a wild animal on the loose. The dog was gone, euthanized. Days after the attack at Lollipop Farm, Humane Society, the fear was deeper than that. It was fear of the unknown. If a man like Richard, responsible, quiet, loving, could be taken like this, what does that mean for the rest of us? His family was devastated, not just by the loss, but by the way it happened. There was no goodbye, no final words, just a horrible phone call, a welfare check. And then their reality of what deputies found inside the house on Kendall Road. One relatives, speaking to a reporter off camera, said it. Plainly, it wasn't just that we lost him, it's how we lost him. How do you process losing someone you love to something they loved? It's a question with no answer, and in the homes along that quiet stretch of upstate New York, it still echoes every year. In the United States, between 30 and 50 people lose their lives to fatal dog attacks. Most of those victims never saw it coming, and while each story is unique, every case with its own circumstances, some patterns begin to merge, according to national data. Mixed breed dogs and those with pit bull type lineage are involved in a significant number of fatal incidents. That fact has ignited years of debate. But experts warn breed alone doesn't explain behavior, environment, history, trauma, and training or lack thereof can all influence what a dog becomes. Richard Damrowski's dog was believed to be a mixed breed, possibly with pit bull characteristics, but no official confirmation was ever made, and to those who knew the animal it seemed gentle, quiet, tame, which only deepens the mystery. Not all dogs of any breed are dangerous, says one animal behaviorist we spoke to, but when a dog's early life is unknown, when you don't know what they've been through, what they've learned, what they've feared, you're stepping into the dark. Poor early socialization, untreated fear, medical conditions, or even subtle signs of stress can build quietly until they explode. The dog that attacked Richard had no known record of aggression, no complaints, no incidents, but in a single moment, that silence was shattered. As one expert put it, even loving dogs can become unpredictable, especially under stress, fear, or injury. And when they do, the consequences can be fatal. In the small town of Rhea, where life moves slow and neighbors know your name, the death of Richard Damrowski wasn't just a tragedy. It was a wake-up call, because while the shock of what happened is hard to grasp, the questions that follow are even harder to answer. What does responsible dog ownership truly mean? Is love enough? Is good intention enough? Experts say no. It starts with education, understanding the needs of the animal, not just its wants. Breed traits matter not because they define every individual dog, but because they shape instincts, energy levels, and triggers, and trauma. History, if it's even known, can carry scars that aren't visible. A noise, a gesture, a moment of confusion can reignite something buried deep. Training isn't a one-time lesson. It's a lifestyle. And some dogs need structure, boundaries, and emotional security. Far more than others. In Richard's case, he gave this dog a second chance, a roof companionship, a quiet life. But rescue doesn't always mean rehabilitation, and trust doesn't always mean safety. These aren't things people want to believe, but they are things we must confront, because when it goes wrong, when the trust is broken, the consequences don't just fall on the dog. They fall on the people who love them. Most Richard's story will never leave the minds of those who knew him, and forth those hearing it now. It becomes a quiet warning. This wasn't a man who lived recklessly. He didn't invite danger into his home knowingly. He opened his heart and his door to a dog that needed saving. But in that act of compassion, something went terribly wrong because he didn't die. At the hands of a stranger but from the jaws of a friend. In a quiet house on Kendall Road, love and violence collided, and one man paid the ultimate price. If this story left you speechless, subscribe for more real-life accounts of animal attacks. Comment and share to keep these stories heard. Thanks for watching. And always remember, every animal deserves love, but not everyone is.